The British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. Of course, your eye is drawn to the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. You notice there, she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
Camilla was in a very, very unpleasant situation. She was vilified.
The cameras were meant to capture royal elegance, but one brief moment appeared to change the entire mood of the evening. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked in wearing a tiara linked to the late Queen Elizabeth II, attention turned toward Queen Camilla. Was it only a passing glance, or did something deeper suddenly surface? Inside the world of the British royal family, a tiara is never just a tiara. It is memory, rank, trust, and history placed in full view beneath the palace lights. Every jewel chosen for a major royal occasion carries a message, whether that message is spoken aloud or left for the public to interpret. And according to royal watchers, the moment Catherine entered wearing one of the monarchy's most emotionally powerful pieces, the room seemed to shift around her. The reported scene has stirred intense discussion because it brought together three forces that have always shaped royal life: the past, the present, and the future. The past was carried in the jewel, with its connection to the late Queen, and the long memory of royal women who wore history before Catherine. The present was represented by King Charles III and Queen Camilla, still working to define this reign under constant scrutiny. And the future appeared through Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Catherine, whose public roles are increasingly tied to the next chapter of the monarchy. That is why this moment has become so fascinating. It was not simply about who looked more glamorous or who attracted more cameras. It was about what the cameras may have captured when Catherine stepped into a room carrying a symbol many viewers associate with legitimacy, continuity, and royal inheritance. Reports and online commentary have claimed that Camilla's reaction was noticeable as Catherine entered. Buckingham Palace has not publicly explained any such moment, and it would be wrong to claim private feelings as fact. A single expression can be misunderstood. A camera can catch a person between movements. A fleeting glance can be turned into a story far larger than the truth. But the reason this particular image has gained so much attention is because it landed inside a royal history that is already emotionally charged. Queen Camilla's path has never been simple. Her public role beside Charles has been built slowly through years of service, endurance, and careful acceptance. She is queen now, and her position is formally secure. Yet royal life is not measured by title alone. It is measured by feeling, memory, and the public's willingness to emotionally accept what the institution presents. That is where Camilla's position has always required delicate management. Catherine's position is different. She did not enter the monarchy with the same public burden. Over time, she has become associated with stability, family, restraint, and quiet resilience. After her own health challenges, her return to formal royal life has carried an even deeper emotional meaning. Every appearance now seems to speak not only of duty, but of recovery, not only of elegance, but of endurance. So when Catherine appears wearing a historic tiara connected to the late Queen's legacy, viewers naturally read more into the moment. They do not simply see diamonds. They see trust. They see royal inheritance. They see a future queen being placed into the visual language of monarchy, piece by piece, occasion by occasion. And that kind of symbolism can be powerful enough to change the atmosphere of an entire evening. But was the tiara choice only about honoring the late Queen, or was it also a quiet signal about Catherine's growing role? That is the question royal observers are now asking. Because in monarchy, preparation rarely comes with a public announcement. The palace often prepares the public through repetition, through imagery, through carefully selected occasions, and through symbolic objects that carry more meaning than words. A future queen does not become central in one evening. She becomes central slowly, until the public begins to feel that her place was always inevitable. Catherine's entrance, if read through that lens, becomes more than a beautiful royal moment. It becomes part of a larger pattern. She appears at state occasions. She wears pieces with historical weight. She stands beside William with increasing confidence. She carries herself with the composure expected of someone who will one day help shape the monarchy's emotional identity. None of this needs to be loud to be significant, and that is where the tension begins to deepen. If Catherine is increasingly seen as the natural carrier of the monarchy's most cherished symbols, Then Camilla is placed in a difficult visual position. Not because she has lost formal authority, and not because any rivalry has been confirmed, but because the public often compares royal women through memory. The late Queen represents duty. Diana, Princess of Wales, represents affection and heartbreak. Camilla represents endurance after controversy. Catherine represents the future. When all of those meanings meet beneath one palace roof, even silence can feel heavy. This is why the alleged camera moment has become such a strong point of discussion. Viewers were not only watching Camilla's face, they were watching the emotional map of the monarchy. They were watching a queen who has spent years earning her place, and a future queen whose symbolic power seems to be growing with every major appearance. They were watching a family institution trying to honor the past while preparing the next reign, all without making the present look unsettled. That balance is incredibly delicate for Charles. As monarch, he must protect the dignity of the current reign. As father of William, he must also allow the future to become visible. If Catherine is held back too much, the monarchy loses one of its strongest sources of public reassurance. If she is elevated too quickly, the public may begin speaking of the next era before the current one has fully settled. Every jewel, every entrance, every photograph becomes part of that careful calculation. And this is why the story matters beyond glamour. The tiara was not merely decoration. It became a symbol of who is trusted to carry royal memory forward. Catherine wore it with calm, and that calm became part of the message. Whether the palace intended a powerful signal or simply followed tradition, the public reaction showed that many viewers already see her as the figure through whom the monarchy's future can be imagined. But that still leaves the deeper question unresolved. Was Camilla's captured reaction only an ordinary moment caught by the camera, or did it reveal the pressure of watching Catherine step closer to the symbolic heart of the crown? To understand why this mattered, we have to look at what was quietly building long before the public noticed. What had been quietly building long before the public noticed was not simply a question of jewels, but a question of inheritance. Not inheritance in the legal sense, because the line of succession is clear, but inheritance in the emotional sense. Who is allowed to carry the memories, symbols, and public trust that keep the monarchy alive from one generation to the next? That is why the reported tension surrounding Catherine's tiara mattered so deeply. If the claims are accurate, this was not an ordinary disagreement over what should be worn at a formal event. It was a struggle over meaning. A historic tiara linked to the late queen does not simply rest on a royal head. It places that person inside a story of duty, sacrifice, and continuity. Whoever wears it before the world is not only wearing diamonds. She is wearing the weight of recognition. And recognition is where royal power becomes complicated. Queen Camilla already holds one of the highest positions in the monarchy. She is queen beside King Charles III, visible at state occasions, present in the ceremonial language of the reign, and formally accepted within the structure of the crown. But public feeling does not always move at the same pace as official rank. Camilla's position may be settled in law and protocol, yet emotionally, many royal viewers still interpret her through a long and difficult history. That history does not vanish simply because titles change. Catherine's rise has followed a very different path. She has become central not through controversy, but through patience. Her authority has gathered slowly, almost quietly, through years of restraint, family devotion, public service, and careful presence at moments when the monarchy needed calm. She has not appeared to force herself into royal symbolism. Instead, royal symbolism has increasingly moved toward her. That difference matters because the monarchy is entering a period where emotional legitimacy may matter almost as much as formal authority. The public knows who the queen is. The public knows who the future queen will be. But the deeper question is which figure people instinctively trust with the monarchy's most sacred memories. And if royal watchers are right, Catherine's appearance in the late queen's tiara seemed to answer that question without a single word being spoken. But was that answer welcomed by everyone inside the palace? That is where the story becomes more sensitive. Reports and online claims have suggested that there was tension over the tiara before Catherine appeared. It remains unconfirmed, and Buckingham Palace has not publicly acknowledged any such dispute. But the fact that the allegation gained attention shows how believable the underlying emotional conflict has become to many observers. The public can imagine tension over a jewel because they understand that royal jewels are never only about beauty. They are about belonging. For Camilla, a tiara linked to the late queen would carry its own meaning. It would connect her present role to the legitimacy of the previous reign. It would reinforce her place beside Charles not only as his wife, but as a woman accepted into the deepest ceremonial identity of the monarchy. After decades of public scrutiny, such symbolism would naturally carry importance. It would not simply decorate her. It would validate her. For Catherine, the same tiara would send a different message. It would not be about proving acceptance after a difficult past. It would be about preparing the future. It would connect her to the late queen's discipline, Diana's public memory, and the quiet expectation that one day she will stand at William's side as queen. In Catherine's case, the jewel would not close an old argument. It would open a new chapter. That is why one object could mean two very different things to two very different women. And this is where palace strategy becomes delicate. Charles must protect Camilla's dignity because she is central to his reign. But the monarchy must also allow Catherine's symbolic authority to grow because she is central to the next one. If the current queen is given every major emblem of the past, the future can appear distant. If the future queen is given too much too soon, the present can appear overshadowed. The institution must balance both without allowing the public to sense conflict. But the cameras make that balance harder to maintain. At a major royal event, images move faster than explanations. A glance becomes a theory. A jewel becomes a declaration. A seating arrangement, a facial expression, or the direction of a photographer's lens can shape public perception before any official source has the chance to respond. That is why the alleged moment involving Camilla caught on camera became so widely discussed. Viewers were not only studying her reaction, they were studying the balance of power that reaction seemed to reveal. Was she simply watching Catherine enter, as any royal figure might? Was she admiring the tiara, reflecting on the late queen, or aware of how strongly the public would respond to Catherine wearing it? No one outside that room can know. But the uncertainty itself kept the story alive because royal viewers are often drawn most deeply to the moments the palace refuses to explain. And beneath that uncertainty sits a larger institutional question. Who controls royal memory? The late queen's legacy is the most powerful inheritance the modern monarchy possesses. Every senior figure wants, in some way, to be connected to it. Charles inherited her throne. Camilla shares his reign. William carries the future line. Catherine increasingly appears to carry the emotional continuity many viewers associate with Elizabeth's steadiness and Diana's human warmth. That combination gives her a rare kind of symbolic strength. It also makes her a potential focus of tension, because when Catherine wears a tiara linked to the late queen, she does not only honor history. She becomes part of the image through which the public imagines royal history continuing. That is a powerful position for someone who is not yet queen. It makes her visible not as a supporting figure, but as a central pillar of what comes next. And in a family where hierarchy is everything, becoming central before the official moment arrives can create quiet pressure around everyone else. For William, Catherine's presence strengthens the future monarchy he will one day lead. For Charles, it reassures the public that the next chapter is already prepared. For Camilla, it may create a more complicated emotional landscape because the public comparison between the queen and the future queen becomes harder to avoid. No one has to declare rivalry for contrast to exist. Sometimes contrast is created by the room itself. That is why the story now feels larger than one tiara. It has become a question of how the monarchy manages transition while still honoring the present. It has become a question of whether Catherine is simply being trusted with historic jewels, or whether those jewels are being used to quietly prepare the public for her future authority. And once that possibility entered the conversation, the story moved into far more sensitive territory, because behind the glittering surface of the tiara, another issue was beginning to emerge. Whether Catherine's symbolic rise is now powerful enough to change how the entire royal household positions itself around her. That question reaches into the quiet machinery of the palace, because symbolic rise inside the royal family is rarely a matter of personal popularity alone. It depends on who is allowed into certain spaces, who is trusted with certain objects, and who can appear before the world carrying history without making the institution look uncertain. Catherine's growing presence around the monarchy's most emotional symbols suggests that something more serious may now be taking shape. The deeper issue is not whether one tiara caused one evening of speculation. It is whether Catherine has become the royal figure through whom the palace can safely connect the late queen's legacy to the next reign. That is a powerful position because Queen Elizabeth II remains the monarchy's strongest modern symbol of duty. Any royal who appears closely linked to her memory is not only being decorated by the past, they are being measured against it. That is why Catherine's composure matters so much. She does not appear to treat historic jewels as trophies. She wears them as if she understands that they come with restraint, discipline, and expectation. That distinction is important. In royal life, the most dangerous mistake is to look as though one is enjoying power too obviously. The crown rewards those who appear to carry privilege as responsibility, not possession. Catherine's public strength has always been that she seems to understand the difference. Some royal watchers believe this is why the cameras return to her so naturally at major occasions. It is not simply because she is admired. It is because her image helps the monarchy tell a story it desperately needs the public to believe, that the future will be elegant, steady, dutiful, and emotionally safe. In a period when the institution has faced health concerns, family distance, public scrutiny, and generational change, that story is more valuable than almost any formal statement. But with that value comes pressure. If Catherine becomes the natural focus of royal memory, then the people around her must adjust. William's role becomes more protective and more visible because every image of Catherine is also an image of the future reign. Charles must permit her symbolic authority to grow without allowing it to look as though his reign is fading into the background. Camilla must maintain dignity in a room where the future queen may be receiving the stronger emotional response from viewers. That is not necessarily a conflict. It may simply be the natural discomfort of transition. Monarchies always have this problem. The future must be introduced early enough for people to trust it, but not so early that the present appears weakened. Queen Elizabeth II managed this balance for decades because her authority was so overwhelming that no future figure could easily eclipse her. Charles does not have that same public insulation. His reign began late, under intense scrutiny, and with the next generation already highly visible. That means the palace must choreograph continuity with extreme care. And Catherine is now central to that choreography. Every time she wears a jewel connected to the late Queen or Diana, the monarchy gains emotional depth, but it also invites comparison. Every time she appears serene beside William, the next reign looks more believable, but the current reign must share the public's imagination with what comes after it. Every time Camilla is shown in the same ceremonial space, viewers are reminded that royal womanhood inside this family has always been shaped by memory, acceptance, and unspoken hierarchy. This is why the alleged camera moment became such a powerful symbol. It appeared to place Camilla and Catherine inside the same visual argument, even if no argument existed between them personally. One woman represents a role that was hard-won after years of public resistance. The other represents a role that the public seems increasingly ready to embrace before it has fully arrived. That contrast is not created by hostility. It is created by history. And history is impossible to remove from a royal room. For Camilla, the difficulty is that her position will always require careful presentation. She has served with consistency, and her role beside Charles is firmly established. Yet when Catherine wears a jewel connected to the late Queen or Diana, public emotion moves in a direction palace officials cannot completely manage. It moves toward nostalgia, sympathy, legacy, and hope. Those feelings do not attack Camilla directly, but they can make her role feel more complicated by comparison. For William, the meaning is different. Catherine's symbolic rise strengthens the emotional foundation of his future kingship. A monarch is not judged only by law or rank. He is judged by whether the public can imagine him carrying the crown with seriousness and confidence. Catherine helps make that image complete. She brings warmth to William's duty, calm to his future authority, and continuity to the family line that will follow Charles. But was the palace simply allowing a natural evolution, or was it making a more strategic calculation? That is the question serious observers are beginning to ask. Because if Catherine's tiara appearances are becoming more significant, then the palace may be using jewelry as a form of preparation. Not in a crude or theatrical way, but in the traditional royal sense. Quietly, gradually, and with enough ambiguity that nothing has to be officially confirmed. The public is invited to watch, interpret, and slowly accept what the symbols are already suggesting. This is where the story becomes larger than one camera angle. It touches the hidden power of access. Who decides which royal woman wears which historic piece? Who understands the emotional impact before the doors open? Who calculates whether the public will see tribute, rivalry, remembrance, or succession? These decisions may look decorative from the outside, but inside the monarchy, they are part of managing legitimacy itself. And once legitimacy enters the conversation, the stakes rise sharply. Because the monarchy cannot afford for its symbols to appear contested. It cannot allow the late Queen's legacy to become a battlefield of interpretation. It must make the transition from Charles to William feel seamless, dignified, and emotionally secure. Catherine's calm presence helps achieve that, but it also makes her influence more visible with every major appearance. So the real question is no longer simply what Camilla's expression meant. It is who inside the palace understood the consequences of Catherine wearing that tiara before the public ever saw it. And to understand why this moment may matter so much, we have to look at the one development that changed the entire direction of the story. That development was not simply Catherine wearing the tiara. It was the allegation that, before she ever entered the room, the jewel itself had already become the center of a far more delicate palace concern. According to online claims and royal commentary, questions have been raised behind the scenes about access, control, and who had the right to appear publicly with a piece carrying such deep association with the late Queen's legacy. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed any such dispute, and the more dramatic claims remain unverified. But the reason the story gained force was because it touched the one thing the monarchy protects most carefully, the credibility of its symbols. In royal life, a tiara is not just stored, selected, and worn. It is guarded through layers of protocol because it belongs to a wider language of authority. The person who wears it becomes part of a message the palace sends to the world. If that message appears confused, contested, or manipulated, the risk is not only embarrassment. The risk is that the institution looks divided over its own inheritance. That is why the alleged tension surrounding the tiara became so consequential. If even a small question existed over who should wear it, then the decision to allow Catherine to appear in it carried a meaning far beyond beauty. It suggested that someone inside the royal structure, whether by protocol, trust, or deliberate calculation, believed Catherine could carry that history before the cameras without weakening its meaning. And once she stepped into the room with calm authority, the public did not see hesitation. They saw certainty. That certainty may have been the true turning point. Because the moment Catherine appeared composed beneath the late Queen's symbolic legacy, the story moved from private speculation into public meaning. Whatever concerns may have existed behind the scenes, the image presented to the world was controlled, dignified, and powerful. There was no visible confusion, no disorder, no sign that the monarchy had struggled over the message. Catherine entered as though the jewel belonged naturally within her royal path, and for many viewers, that was enough to make the moment feel settled. But the consequences of that image were not equal for everyone. For Catherine, the appearance strengthened the impression that she is becoming one of the monarchy's principal carriers of continuity. Her composure did not simply serve her own public image. It served the institution. In a period when the royal family has had to manage illness, absence, transition, and constant scrutiny, a single image of the future queen appearing steady beneath a historic tiara became a form of reassurance. It told viewers that whatever uncertainty may exist elsewhere, the next chapter still looks prepared. For William, the moment also carried strategic weight. He did not need to make a speech or publicly defend his wife's position. The image did it for him. Catherine's confident presence reinforced the idea that the future reign will not be built on him alone, but on a partnership the public has already learned to trust. A future king is strengthened when the woman beside him appears capable of carrying history with grace, and that night, Catherine's visual authority helped complete the picture of the monarchy that will one day follow Charles. For the king, the balance was more delicate. Charles must preserve the dignity of the current reign while allowing the next one to become visible. He cannot appear to rush history, but neither can he hide the future from the public. If Catherine's appearance was intended simply as tradition, it still achieved something larger. It reminded viewers that the crown's emotional survival depends not only on the monarch wearing it now, but on those who will one day carry its meaning forward. And for Camilla, the moment was perhaps most sensitive of all. It remains unconfirmed what she felt, what she knew, or how she interpreted Catherine's entrance. But royal perception rarely waits for private explanation. The cameras captured an image that many viewers interpreted through decades of history, and that interpretation placed Camilla in a difficult symbolic position. As queen, she is formally secure. But when Catherine appears in a jewel linked to the late queen's sacred memory, the public may respond with a warmth and emotional certainty that no title alone can manufacture. That does not mean Camilla was replaced. It does not prove rivalry. It does not confirm any of the more serious allegations circulating online. But it does reveal how fragile public interpretation can be when royal symbols are involved. The same room can hold two queens in different stages of history, one reigning beside the king, the other waiting beside the heir. One represents the present, the other increasingly represents what the public believes is coming next. And once that contrast becomes visible, palace strategy becomes much more complicated. Because from that point forward, every future jewel choice will be watched more closely. If Catherine is again entrusted with pieces connected to the late Queen or Diana, royal observers will see a pattern. If Camilla wears similar symbols, some may read it as the palace reinforcing her present authority. If both women appear together in historically significant jewels, every expression, position, and camera angle will be studied for clues about balance, trust, and influence. That is the burden of monarchy in the modern age. Its symbols are ancient, but its audience is instant. A single image can be replayed thousands of times before the palace has time to shape the explanation. A glance can become a theory. A tiara can become a referendum on succession. A calm entrance can become proof, in the public imagination, that the future has already begun to gather around one figure. This is why Section 4 of the story becomes more urgent. The issue is no longer whether Catherine looked elegant or whether Camilla's reaction was misunderstood. The issue is whether the monarchy can continue managing these symbols without allowing the public to sense deeper internal strain. If the crown's most powerful memories begin attaching themselves more firmly to Catherine, then the palace must decide how openly it allows that shift to unfold. And that decision affects the whole royal household. It affects Charles, because his reign must not look temporary. It affects Camilla, because her authority must not look overshadowed. It affects William, because the future he represents must feel ready but not impatient. And it affects Catherine, because the more symbolic trust gathers around her, the more carefully she must carry every public step. The most serious implication, then, is not that one evening revealed a confirmed palace crisis. It is that one evening showed how quickly the monarchy's future image can become the center of public attention. Catherine did not need to claim anything. The tiara, the cameras, and the reaction around her did the work silently. But even then, one question remained unanswered, and it is the question that could define the entire story. Was this moment simply the honoring of royal history, or was it the clearest sign yet that Catherine is becoming the living bridge between the late Queen's legacy and the monarchy's next era? If Catherine has become the living bridge between the late Queen's legacy and the monarchy's next era, then the meaning of that evening reaches far beyond the sparkle of a tiara. It becomes a story about how royal authority is transferred emotionally before it is ever transferred formally. And that is why the moment has stayed in public conversation longer than any ordinary state appearance would. The monarchy does not survive on law alone. It survives on belief. People must believe that the symbols still matter, that the family carrying them still understands their weight, and that the next generation can inherit more than titles. They must inherit trust. That is what Catherine's appearance seemed to represent for so many viewers. She was not simply wearing something beautiful from the royal collection. She was standing inside a memory the public already knew and appearing calm enough to carry it forward. That is where the deeper significance begins. Queen Elizabeth II's legacy remains the strongest emotional foundation of the modern monarchy. Her image is tied to duty, restraint, sacrifice, and a lifetime of service. Any royal figure who appears connected to that legacy is immediately placed under a powerful light. The comparison is demanding, almost unfair, because no one can simply become the late queen by wearing a jewel associated with her era. But a person can remind the public of the qualities the late queen represented, and Catherine seems to do that in a way many viewers find reassuring. This does not mean every interpretation should be accepted without caution. Some of the more dramatic online claims surrounding the tiara, palace tension, or private reactions remain unconfirmed, and Buckingham Palace has not publicly verified those details. A responsible reading must leave room for the possibility that the evening was simply a beautifully staged royal occasion, with Catherine honoring history and Camilla's expression being overanalyzed by cameras and commentary. Royal footage can be misleading. A glance is not a confession. A pause is not proof. But even if the simpler explanation is true, the reaction itself still matters. It tells us what the public is ready to believe. It tells us that many people now see Catherine as someone naturally connected to royal continuity. It tells us that the future queen has become one of the monarchy's strongest emotional assets, not because the palace has shouted it, but because the public has slowly accepted it. That may be the most important part of the entire story. Camilla's position remains formal and real. She is the queen beside Charles, and her place in the current reign is not erased by one image, one jewel, or one moment of public speculation. Yet her role will always be read through a complicated history, and that makes every comparison with Catherine more sensitive. Camilla represents survival after controversy. Catherine represents continuity before the future arrives. One has had to earn acceptance through endurance. The other has gathered trust through steadiness. Neither path is easy, and neither should be reduced to a simple rivalry. But royal life is shaped by contrast, even when no one intends conflict. When two royal women stand in the same ceremonial space, the public brings memory into the room with them. They remember Diana. They remember the late Queen. They remember Charles's long journey to the throne. They look at William and Catherine and imagine what comes next. The palace may control the seating, the lighting, and the jewels, but it cannot completely control what people feel when they see them. That is why Catherine's tiara moment may become historically important. Not because it proves a secret struggle, but because it revealed how much symbolic power has already gathered around her. She has become more than a graceful presence at William's side. She is increasingly part of the monarchy's language of reassurance. Her appearances tell viewers that the institution has a future. Her composure suggests that tradition can continue without feeling frozen. Her connection to historic jewels allows the past to be carried forward without appearing trapped there. For Charles, this is both necessary and delicate. His reign must remain dignified and central, yet every monarchy must prepare the public for what follows. He cannot prevent the future from becoming visible because the future is essential to the crown's survival. But he must ensure that the transition feels calm, not rushed, natural, not forced, respectful, not divisive. Catherine's role helps with that because she makes preparation feel gentle. She does not appear to push toward authority. She simply carries more of it each time the institution places history around her. For William, the meaning is equally strong. A future king needs the public to believe not only in him, but in the royal household he will lead. Catherine strengthens that vision. She gives his future reign warmth, discipline, and emotional depth. When she appears beneath a tiara tied to the monarchy's most remembered women, she helps the public imagine the next chapter with confidence. And that is what royal observers will be watching next. Not only which jewel Catherine wears, but when she wears it, how often she is placed at the center of ceremonial imagery, and how the palace balances her growing symbolism with Camilla's present position. They will watch how Charles handles the delicate overlap between current authority and future expectation. They will watch how William stands beside Catherine, not merely as husband, but as heir beside the woman who will one day help define his reign. So what do you think? Was this simply one elegant royal appearance, or does it point to a much larger shift inside the monarchy? Was Catherine honoring the late queen's memory, or was the palace quietly allowing the future queen to step closer to the symbolic heart of the crown? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep royal analysis, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary-style royal story. Because in the royal family, the future is not always declared in words. Sometimes, it appears in silence, beneath a sacred tiara, while the world watches who is trusted to wear history next.